Babe, tell him I didn't do anything.
You will be all right.
The door didn't slide open slowly. It swung hard. The kind of swing that says somebody on the other side had been waiting for a very long time. Everett Braxton stood at the threshold of cell block D in the Harris County Detention Center, Houston, Texas, still wearing the same gray t-shirt they had booked him in 48 days ago. His hands were steady. His jaw was set. His eyes were dry. Because a man who has nothing left to lose doesn't shake. He burns. His lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Delia Voss, was already waiting outside with a manila folder thick enough to break a table. She handed it to him without a word. He opened it, read the first page, closed it. Everett, when did you get this? Delia, 3 hours ago. I drove straight here. Everett, and the wedding? Delia, tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock, River Oaks. Everett looked up at the Houston skyline. All glass towers and oil money, and the kind of sky that doesn't care who suffers underneath it. He smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile a chess player gives right before checkmate. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that the thought of them lying to you never even crossed your mind? Not once? Someone you would have put your hand in fire for? That was Everett and Nadine Braxton. At least, that's what Everett believed. Because while he was sitting in that jail cell counting ceiling tiles, the woman he called his wife was out in Houston picking flower arrangements and champagne glasses for a wedding to another man. And every single person who helped put him behind those bars, she had personally sent them an invitation. Stay with me, because this story is about to go places you are not ready for. 49 days before that prison door opened, Everett Braxton was the kind of man Houston liked to point to and say, "See, that's what this city builds." Born in 3rd Ward to a woman who cleaned office buildings at night, and a father who drove city buses until his knees gave out. No trust fund, no connections, no head start, just a mind that could see opportunity where other people saw nothing. By 31, he owned 2 commercial real estate properties in Midtown. By 34, he had built a construction consulting firm that grossed 7 figures. His mother, Celestine, had moved out of the apartment she'd rented for 22 years into a house in Pearland with a proper backyard and a kitchen she actually liked cooking in. That part matters. Remember that. His best friend since the 9th grade was a man named Orlon Dupree. Orlon had been at every birthday, every business launch, every low point. They had grown up sharing lunches, sharing dreams, sharing the kind of friendship that feels unbreakable because you have never once tested it. Everett had never tested it. That was his mistake. And then there was Nadine Vale, now Nadine Braxton, who had walked into his life 6 years ago at Charity Gala in the Galleria District, wearing a red dress and a smile that could stop a conversation across a room. She was brilliant, warm, thoughtful. She remembered the name of his mother's cat. She sent flowers when deals fell through. She held his face when he was exhausted and told him he was enough. He married her in Montrose on a Saturday in October, a small ceremony. His mother cried. Orlon gave a toast that made the whole room laugh. It was the happiest day of Everett's life. But here's what nobody in that room knew. In Nadine Vale's apartment, 3 weeks before Everett ever asked her dinner, there was a search history on her laptop with 3 words typed into it. Texas Inheritance Law Spouse. She wasn't studying for a class. She was studying him. 2 years into marriage, Everett's uncle, a quiet, stubborn man named Beaumont Braxton, who had spent 40 years running a freight operation out of Beaumont, passed away without children and left everything to Everett. $11.4 million. That's not a typo. Everett sat in the lawyer's office with his hands flat on the table, completely still. Because men who grew up with nothing don't know what to do when everything arrives at once. Nadine, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. Nadine will be smart about it. Together. He believed her. He shouldn't have. Because the day after the inheritance was confirmed, something shifted in Nadine Braxton. Subtle at first. Small things. She started taking longer lunches. She was making calls in the car instead of the house. She started asking questions, Innocent-sounding questions about account structures and business liability and what would happen if a company dissolved. Everett chalked it up to excitement. She was planning their future, he told himself. She was just not the one he was imagining. Meanwhile, Orlon Dupree had started showing up differently too. Less eye contact, more excuses. He canceled 3 dinners in a row. When Everett asked if everything was okay, Orlon gave him a shoulder squeeze and a big grin that didn't reach his eyes. Friends noticed those things. Everett noticed. But he told himself he was being paranoid. He told himself that a lot. It was a Tuesday. Everett had just come home from a site visiting Katie, tired, dusty boots, a coffee going cold in his truck. He pulled into the driveway of their house in River Oaks and saw 2 police cruisers parked outside, and Orlon's car. He sat in his truck for 4 seconds, just staring. Then he got out. The detective who met him at the door was a stocky man named Rhett Calloway. He didn't smile. Calloway. Everett Braxton? Everett. Yeah. Calloway. You need to come with us, sir. Behind the detective, to the open front door, Everett could see Nadine standing in the entryway, her hand over her mouth, her eyes red and wet. She was crying, or she appeared to be. Orlon stood beside her with his hand on her shoulder, looking at the floor. Everett's brain tried to process it all at once, and failed completely. Everett. Nadine, what's happening? She didn't answer. She just pressed her lips together and looked away. Calloway read him his rights on the front porch of his own house. The neighbors across the street watched from their driveway. Everett Braxton, Houston businessman, self-made, respected, loyal, was put in the back of a police car with his hands cupped behind him while his wife stood in the doorway of the house he had bought and did not once say his name. Not once. The charge? Domestic assault, financial fraud, coercive control, everything. And you want to know what the sickest part was? The evidence was perfect. In the Houston legal system, evidence is supposed to tell the truth, but evidence is made by people, and people lie. Everett sat across from his first attorney, a decent man named Theodore Prine, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as each new piece of evidence landed on the table. Text messages from Everett's number, threatening messages, the kind no man sends unless he is something dark and broken. Except Everett had never sent them. Medical records, bruising on Nadine's arm, photographed and documented. Except Everett had never touched her in anger. Not one time in 6 years. Audio recordings. A voice, close enough to his, shouting things in the background of phone calls Nadine had supposedly made to her friends. Except the voice wasn't quite right. A half tone off. The way a copy is almost, but not quite, the original. Prine kept asking the same question. Prine, is there anyone who can confirm your movements on the night of... And then Orlon Dupree walked into the courtroom and sat down in the witness chair. Everett looked at him. Orlon looked everywhere else. Under oath, Orlon confirmed the messages. Confirmed that Everett had a volatile temper. Confirmed that Nadine had called him scared on multiple occasions. He spoke in a low, steady voice, and every word was so precise it sounded rehearsed. Because it was. Everett sat at the defense table and felt something he had never felt before in his adult life. Not fear, not anger, but a specific kind of dread that comes from realizing the floor underneath you was never solid. That the people you built your life on had been planning this while you were busy trusting them. He was convicted, sent to Harris County detention, and as the bailiff walked him out, he turned one last time. Nadine was seated beside her father, a silver-haired Houston attorney named Redmond Vale, and she was dabbing at her eyes with folded tissue. Redmond Vale did not look at Everett. He looked at his watch, like a man checking to see if a meeting had run long. Here is where the story stops being sad and starts being outrageous. Are you ready? Because I need you to be sitting down for this part. Within 72 hours of Everett's conviction, Nadine Braxton began the process of accessing joint accounts. Not slowly, not carefully. She moved like someone with a deadline, because she had one. Legal proceedings take time. Divorces take time. But wire transfers? Those are instant. By the end of the first week, $400,000 had been moved into an account Everett didn't know existed. By the end of the second week, she had filed for emergency divorce proceedings citing, and I am not making this up, fear for her safety. Meanwhile, in cell block D, Everett was learning what it feels like when the world decides you don't matter. His business partner, a quiet man named Waverly Trask, was scrambling to hold the firm together without him. 2 contracts walked out the door in the first week because nobody wanted their name attached to a man on the news for domestic violence. Everett's reputation, the thing he had built for 14 years with his hands and his mind, was bleeding out in real time. And then came the moment that nearly broke him. His mother, Celestine, came to visit on day 12. She sat across from him in the visitation room, a tiny woman in a blue cardigan, and she did not cry. She had never been a woman who cried in front of her son when things were hard, but she put something on the table between them, a receipt from a pawn shop in Pearland. Everett picked it up and read it. She had sold her jewelry, every piece, a gold bangle from her own mother, pearl earrings from her wedding, a small diamond pendant that had been in the family for 30 years. Gone, for legal fees. Celestine, don't look at me like that. They're just things. Everett put the receipt down very carefully. He pressed his fingers flat against the table. And for just a moment, only a moment, something cracked behind his eyes. Because a man can absorb betrayal when it's aimed at him. But when it reaches the people who loved him before he had anything worth taking, that lands differently. On day 31, Nadine Braxton met a man named Fontaine Kessler. Fontaine was exactly the type Nadine needed. Wealthy, owed money from a family that had been in Houston oil since before air conditioning. Kind, trusting, the sort of man who believed the best about people because nothing terrible had ever happened to him. He believed every word Nadine told him about the abuse, about the fear, about how she had nearly lost herself in a marriage to a dangerous man. Fontaine held her hand. He told her she was brave. He started paying for things. Nadine let him. By day 42, they were engaged. I want you to think about that number for 1 second. 42 days after her husband, who had done nothing wrong, was sent to jail based on evidence she helped manufacture. Nadine Vale was engaged to another man. That is not grief. That is not survival. That is a woman executing a plan she had drawn up a long time ago. On day 43, she sent out the wedding invitations. 50 guests. River Oaks Country Club. A Saturday. She invited Redmond Vale, her father. She invited Orlon Dupree. She invited every person who had played a role in what had been done to Everett. And then, either out of arrogance or cruelty, or maybe both, someone slipped a copy of the invitation under Everett's lawyer's door. Delia Voss picked it up at 7 in the morning. Read it. Drove straight to her office. Pulled out a box she had been building quietly for 2 weeks. Evidence her investigator had gathered. A thread she had been pulling since the audio recordings didn't quite match up. She put everything together. And on day 48, she walked into Harris County Detention with a folder thick enough to break a table. The door swung open. Everett walked out, and he did not go home. He made one call, at 4 o'clock, on a Saturday, in River Oaks. The day of the wedding arrived the way Houston Saturdays always do in spring, bright, a little humid, the kind of morning that makes everything feel more significant than it is. Nadine Braxton stood in front of a floor-length mirror at the River Oaks Country Club bridal suite at 11 in the morning, and she looked. There is no other word for it. Stunning. The dress was ivory silk. Simple. Expensive. Everything about her that morning was curated and deliberate, the way everything in Nadine's life had always been curated and deliberate. Her maid of honor, a woman named Brielle Fontaine, adjacent friend, who had no real idea what she was standing next to, was arranging the veil. Brielle, you sure you're okay? You seem far away. Nadine, I'm perfect. Today everything becomes official. She said the way you say something you've been practicing. Because she had been. What Nadine did not know at 11 that morning was that her new fiancé, Fontaine Kessler, had received a phone call the night before from a number he didn't recognize. A woman's voice. Calm. Professional. Delia Voss. Mr. Kessler, my name is Delia Voss. I'm an attorney working on the Braxton case. I need you to hear some things before tomorrow afternoon. After that, what you do is entirely your choice." Fontaine had sat down very slowly on the edge of his bed, and he had listened for 45 minutes. He arrived at the venue at 2 o'clock, on time, dressed beautifully. He greeted guests with a steady handshake and a controlled smile. But his eyes were doing math. At 3:45, a black car pulled up to the River Oaks Country Club service entrance. Everett Braxton stepped out. He was wearing a charcoal suit, the one he kept in his office closet for investor meetings. His shoes were clean. His tie was straight. He had shaved. He looked, in every possible way, like a man who had somewhere important to be and knew exactly what he was walking into. Waverly Trask fell into step beside him. "Waverly, you sure about this?" "Everett, I've never been more sure of anything." "Waverly, there are 50 people in that room." "Everett, good. I only need one audience." Behind them, 2 investigators from the Harris County DA's office walked in plain clothes. Delia Voss had spent 48 days building what she was about to present. The DA had reviewed everything that morning. The warrant had been signed at 2:17 p.m. Everything was in place. Everett pushed open the main doors of the ballroom at 4:01. The ceremony had just begun. The officiant was mid-sentence when the doors opened. The sound of the hinges, not loud, just present, cut through the soft string music like a knife through cloth. 50 heads turned, and then the room went completely, absolutely still, because standing in the doorway of the River Oaks Country Club ballroom, in a charcoal suit with his hands loose at his sides, was a man every person in that room had helped send to jail, or watched be sent, or celebrated being sent. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then it collapsed into noise. Whispers first, then louder. A woman near the back gasped. Someone's champagne flute hit the floor. A guest near the aisle, a heavy-set man in a blue blazer named Court, one of Redmond Vale's associates, leaned to the person beside him and said it loud enough for 3 rows to hear. "Court, shouldn't he still be in jail?" Another guest, a woman named Tristain, actually laughed. A short, sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Tristain, he actually came. That is embarrassing." Phones came out. Several people were already recording, and then Nadine stepped forward from the altar. She moved the way a woman moves when she believes she is untouchable. Slow, deliberate, a small smile on her face that she had absolutely prepared. The room went quiet again to hear her. "Nadine, you came all this way just to watch me marry a better man?" The room erupted. Laughter. Applause from a few corners. Someone said, "Oh, wow," under their breath. Nadine looked at him with the full confidence of a woman who believed she had already won. Everett looked back at her and said nothing. He just waited for seconds. 5. And then the side doors opened. 3 people walked in through the side entrance. 2 in plain clothes, badges now visible. 1 in a suit, a woman Everett's age with a leather folder under her arm and the expression of someone who has been waiting to walk into a room like this for a long time. Delia Voss. The laughter died. Not all at once. It flickered out the way a candle dies. 1 corner, then another, then the whole room. Fontaine Kessler, standing at the altar, did not look surprised. He stepped back 1 step and crossed his arms. Nadine's eyes moved from Everett to Delia to Fontaine and back again, and for the first time since this story began, something on her face cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Everett walked forward until he was standing in the center of the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Everett, I didn't come here to stop a wedding." The room listened. "Everett, I came because every single person who helped destroy me is sitting in this room right now, and I thought they should all hear the truth at the same time." A screen behind the altar, the one the venue used for photo slideshows during receptions, clicked on. The string quartet had stopped playing. Nobody told them to. They just stopped. The first thing that appeared on the screen was a date. 14 months before the arrest. An email chain between Nadine Vale Braxton and a digital forensics consultant named Dewey Pruitt, a man who had made a career out of doing things in shadows that respectable people needed done and didn't want their names attached to. The emails were specific, detailed, They discussed voice modulation software. They discussed how to replicate a phone number for text message spoofing. They discussed the cost of obtaining medical photography that could be staged to appear consistent with injury. The room read the screen. Some people read it twice. A woman 3 rows back put her hand over her mouth. The second document was a bank record. It showed that Dewey Pruitt had been paid $62,000 from a private account, an account opened in a name the room didn't recognize, but that Delia Voss had already traced directly back to Nadine. The third thing that appeared on the screen was audio, not the fake recording. The real one, a conversation between Nadine and Orlon Dupree, recorded 11 months before the arrest, in which they discussed, in plain, calm language, exactly how the timeline would unfold, who would say what in court, what Orlon's testimony needed to cover, how quickly they could move on the accounts once Everett was convicted. Orlon's voice, playing through the ballroom speakers, was steady and businesslike in the recording. In a seat in the 4th row, the real Orlon Dupree had gone the color of old chalk. He started to stand up. One of the investigators placed a hand on his shoulder. Investigator, "Sit down, sir." He sat. Nadine had stopped moving entirely. She was standing in the center of the altar in her ivory silk dress, and she was, for possibly the first time in her adult life, completely without a next move. Because here's the thing about people who plan everything. They only plan for what they think can go wrong. They never plan for the thing they were certain couldn't happen. Fontaine Kessler walked down from the altar, slowly, like a man who needs his legs to remember how to work. He stopped in front of Nadine, and he looked at her the way people look at something they realized they never actually saw clearly. "Fontaine, how much of what you told me was real?" Nadine opened her mouth, closed it. She had 100 answers prepared for 100 situations. She had not prepared for a man who already knew. "Fontaine, I got the call last night. I thought maybe it was someone trying to ruin this. So I listened to everything, all 45 minutes. He looked at her one more time. "Fontaine, you used it to pay for a celebration of something you did to another person." He walked past her toward the exit, without looking back. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said a word. Now, here is the moment I told you was coming. The one I promised you were not ready for. Redmond Vale, Nadine's father, silver-haired Houston attorney, the man who had helped architect this entire scheme, rose slowly from his seat in the front row. The room watched him. Nadine watched him. Her eyes went from confused to something that looked, briefly, like relief, like a daughter reaching for her father in the middle of disaster. "Nadine, Daddy." Redmond Vale reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a USB drive, and he walked it to Delia Voss and placed it in her hand. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Nadine stared at her father. "Nadine, what is that? What did you just... You promised you would protect me." Redmond Vale looked at his daughter for a long moment. His face was not cold. It was something worse. It was grief wearing the mask of a decision already made. "Redmond, I did protect you for a long time." He paused. "Redmond, that drive is everything. Every conversation, every instruction I gave, everything I helped build." "Nadine, why? Why would you?" "Redmond, because 3 weeks ago I found out what you did with your mother's estate." Silence. Nadine's face changed. "Redmond, your mother left that money for your brother's medical care. You moved it, all of it. While we were focused on Everett's case, you moved it into the same account you used for Pruitt." He straightened his jacket. "Redmond, I helped you destroy an innocent man because I thought I was protecting my daughter. But you were never trying to be free, Nadine. You were collecting, and you were going to keep collecting, from whoever came next." He looked at Delia. "Redmond, everything on that drive is authenticated and time-stamped. My attorney has a full statement ready." He walked to a chair in the corner and sat down. He did not look at his daughter again. A man who helped light the fire had just become the one who brought the water, and the room understood something in that moment that no screen could have displayed. Even the people closest to Nadine had eventually discovered what she actually was. The investigators moved quickly once the drive was in hand. They were professional about it. Quiet. The kind of efficiency that comes from having done this enough times to know that a scene is not necessary. Nadine Braxton was arrested in her wedding dress, ivory silk and handcuffs, in front of 50 witnesses, in the same River Oaks venue she had chosen specifically because it felt like winning. Orlon Dupree was arrested for a roseback. He didn't resist. He just sat there until they told him to stand, and then he stood, and then he walked out with his eyes on the floor, the same floor he hadn't been able to look at when he was lying under oath about his best friend. Two of Nadine's associates, guests who had signed statements as character witnesses during the original case, were detained for questioning outside. The flowers were still standing. The champagne was still chilled. The string quartet's instruments sat untouched on their stands. 50 people walked out of River Oaks Country Club in complete silence. No reception, no toast, no first dance. Just the sound of heels on marble and 50 people individually processing the same thought. I was in this room. The white roses were the last things left standing when the last guest walked out. Roses don't know what they're decorating. People should. Outside, in the late afternoon Houston sun, Nadine Braxton passed Everett Braxton on the steps of the venue. She was being walked to a vehicle. Her dress dragged slightly on the ground. Her veil was gone. She had lost it somewhere inside. She stopped. The investigator beside her paused. Nadine looked at Everett, and for one moment, just one, something moved across her face that was not calculation or performance. Something that looked, briefly, like the ghost of the woman she might have been if she had made different choices. Nadine, I never thought you'd actually come back. Everett looked at her, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the calm exhaustion of a man who has survived something that should have ended him and knows it. Everett, I didn't come back for you. He let that sit for a second. Everett, I came back for the truth. The truth just happened to need a seat at your wedding. He walked down the steps. He did not look back. Celestine Braxton, his mother, was waiting beside a car at the bottom of the steps. Small woman, blue cardigan. The same cardigan she always wore when something important was happening. She took her son's face in both her hands the way she had when he was 9 years old, and the world had been too big for one day. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He put his arms around her and held on. And that, right there, was the only moment in this entire story that had nothing to do with money, revenge, or justice. It was just a son and his mother, standing in the sun, still standing. The conviction was overturned within 30 days of the evidence submission. The judge's language in the ruling was pointed and direct, a manufactured case, built on fabricated communications and coordinated testimony. Everett Braxton's name was cleared. Celestine's jewelry was recovered through asset seizure proceedings. Every piece, the gold bangle, the pearl earrings, the diamond pendant. A judge ordered them returned. Everett and Waverly Trask rebuilt the firm. Slowly at first, one contract at a time, one relationship rebuilt per week. Within 8 months, 2 of the clients who had walked away came back. One of them sent a letter with the contract. The letter said, "We made a judgment based on a headline. We should have waited for the truth. We are sorry." Everett kept the letter. Nadine Braxton was convicted on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and financial theft. Orlon Dupree pleaded guilty to perjury and obstruction. Dewey Pruitt, the forensics consultant, was arrested in Dallas 2 weeks after the wedding and cooperated fully with investigators. Redmond Vale submitted his full statement and surrendered his law license. He served community hours and probation. It was, some argued, not enough. Others said a man who chose truth when it cost him everything had earned a complicated mercy. Fontaine Kessler gave a brief statement to the press outside the courthouse. "I was deceived. I am grateful to people who told me the truth before I made a permanent mistake." Nobody blamed him. As for Everett, he didn't give any interviews. He didn't post anything. He didn't hold a press conference or shake anyone's hand for cameras. He went back to work. Because that is what men who build things do when something falls apart. They build again. I want to say this plainly before we close. Nadine Braxton was not destroyed by Everett's revenge. She was destroyed by the truth. Everett didn't fabricate anything. He didn't manipulate anyone. He didn't plant evidence or pay someone to lie. He walked into a room with documentation and let reality speak for itself. That is not revenge. That is accountability, wearing the same suit it always wears when it finally shows up. And here's the part that should keep you thinking long after this video ends. Nadine didn't lose because Everett was clever. She lost because she never stopped. She kept going after Everett's money was gone. She went after her mother's estate. She was going to keep going after whoever came next. Greed without a stop point is an ambition. It's a pattern. And patterns always repeat until something or someone breaks them. The person who broke this one was her own father. Think about what it took for Redmond Vale to walk that USB drive across a ballroom and hand it to the opposing attorney in front of his daughter in her wedding dress. That was not an easy thing, but it was the right one. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is choose what's right even when it costs them everything they thought they were protecting.